Hi, so welcome to part 1 of series 5 of playing over changes, and those of you who have seen the previous episodes will have a pretty good idea of what we might be up to here, although today represents a little bit of a change of tactic in that we get quite a bit of time to play over this sequence before we get a change. So we're going to be thinking about how we can colour up that playing a little bit, make it as interesting as possible while we're waiting for those changes to come along. Now, in all of these videos, we're trying to use real life chord sequences. So these are things you will have heard on a recording at one time or another. Each of us will probably have our own particular song that we may go, oh, that's what I think that is, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. What matters is actually the harmonies involved. So we're dealing with playing over G minor. Although it's just one fixed chord, the implication is that there's a little bit of a riff going on there which gives it a major sound, and what I mean by that is the 4 chord doesn't sound like that. Sounds a little bit incorrect for this particular genre. Now, the interesting thing about this is that having spent several bars playing over what sounds like G minor going to C, the change that we come across next is C minor, but I'm going to be dealing with that as we go along. As ever, we'll be taking this in little chunks. So the first thing to do is to have a little listen to how that would sound if we play our pentatonic through it. Okay, now as you can hear, it's a fairly black and white sort of sound we're getting there. It's not that there's anything wrong with that sound, it's just after so many bars it's a little difficult to find things to do with that, and this is where we can start thinking about adding our major scales to minor keys. Now, I've talked about type 1 and type 2 minors in previous videos, but I'm just going to recap on that very briefly. Effectively, what we need running through this G minor scale, if we're going to add something to our pentatonic, there's a couple of tones that we can add to that, and the source of those will be from a major scale. Now, in this particular case, I'm going to be using an F scale. So the next thing I want to do is just play that F scale through that sequence. Okay, now again, geography is important here. We know we've got G minor here, so I don't want to be playing an F scale that's up here, at least not for the moment, or until I'm playing a G minor that's up there. So I want something in the ballpark, that's the idea of it. So the particular scale I'm going to be using, and there's a little graphic of this coming up, but here's the scale. Now, obviously, if we're playing in G, or G minor I should say, we've got to consider that when we play our phrases. So it's not a bad idea, if you're messing around with this F scale, to play these sort of figures. Okay, now let's see what that sounds like when we're playing it along with the chords. I'm going to keep this going very slow. This is not about me doing all this stuff. That's not going to teach anybody anything. This is about hearing how those tones work. Okay, so here we're going to have our F scale and just that. So as you can hear from that example, that fits our G minor quite nicely. The snag we're going to have is when our C minor comes along, we have a change in tonality. So what we're talking about here then, first of all, is just thinking G minor and trying to get that F scale working into it. So there are some phrases you can play which will be, I think, very helpful. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Here's my F scale. Okay, and you can hear it kind of steps in and out of a tonality there. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to introduce the idea of a passing note. Okay, now there's nothing big deal about that, but the point I'm making is it's very easy to get caught up saying to yourself, well, I'm playing a major scale here, so I mustn't use any passing notes. That isn't how it works. You need to combine stuff. So would become or something similar to that. So it gives you a lot more to go with. So here's a little example of what that would sound like in practice. So that gives us our F scale with our G minor. So that's a starting point from which to work. We're going to look at broadening some of those ideas a little bit more as we go along. But the important thing is just to play against that G minor to start with and get used to the idea of the F scale within it. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks very much for watching, and please hit the subscribe button. That'd be great. Okay, bye for now.